Most people aren't destroyed by a great tragedy, but by small daily surrenders, by the habits they repeat without thinking, by the gestures they justify with phrases like, "That's just how I am, it's no big deal, I'm used to it." No one breaks all at once. True weakness doesn't arrive with a crash, it comes quietly. It seeps into the smallest decisions, into the thoughts you tolerate, into the seconds you give away without realizing it. And when you finally notice that something inside you has gone dim, you've already spent years losing the most important battle, the one that takes place within you. You make yourself weak when you live for approval, when your mood depends on someone else's thumbs up, on the message that never arrives, on the look that validates you. You make yourself weak when you react without thinking, when you give in to impulse, when you let emotion decide what reason should rule. You make yourself weak when you flee discomfort, when you confuse calm with comfort, when you choose quick pleasure over lasting peace. That's where surrender begins, in the ordinary, in what seems harmless. Stoicism wasn't born for temples or speeches, it was born for these small battles. Marcus Aurelius didn't speak from the grandeur of an emperor, but from the fatigue of a man who also doubted. Seneca didn't write to be admired, but to survive himself. Epictetus taught that true freedom doesn't consist in doing what you want, but in not being a slave to what you feel. That's the uncomfortable truth we forget. There is no enemy more dangerous than your own habits. Life doesn't break you. You break yourself when you stop choosing consciously. Every thought you let pass unchecked, every word you speak without control, every time you react before observing yourself, you give away a part of you, a piece of your reason, a fragment of your will, a sliver of your serenity. And the worst part is, you do it thinking it's nothing, but everything happens inside you. Every time you justify instead of correct, you're giving up the chance to grow stronger. The Stoics spoke of the hegemonikon, the ruling center of the soul, that place where your clarity, your judgment, your freedom live. You lose it each time you let yourself be dragged by anxiety, comparison, or complaint. You lose it when you become a spectator of yourself, watching from afar as your life fills with habits you never consciously chose. The world doesn't need to destroy you. You do that yourself when you live on autopilot. The cruelest thing about weakness is that it disguises itself as calm. You think you're at peace, but really you've surrendered. You convince yourself that everything's fine, but what there is resignation. And in that resignation bloom the worst habits, those fed by fear, exhaustion, and the false peace that exists only to keep you from thinking. You distract yourself to avoid feeling. You work without purpose. You speak without truth. And in that seemingly normal routine, your inner strength erodes without you noticing. Seneca wrote with painful clarity, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Weakness is born from the same source. It's not that you lack power, it's that you squander it. You lose it in arguments that don't matter, in guilt that serves no purpose, in pleasures that don't fulfill. You lose it because you don't know where to place your energy, and when everything matters to you, nothing sustains you. That's why the ancient sages insisted, don't waste your strength on what you cannot control, or you'll end up unable to control even what you can. The modern soul has forgotten the essential truth. That character is trained. Strength isn't a gift, it's a daily practice, and every habit, however small, can be either a brick or a crack in your spirit. No one becomes strong by accident. Strength comes to those who observe themselves with brutal honesty, those who dare to ask, in what part of my life am I lying to myself? What am I doing every day that makes me weaker without realizing it? Because there comes a point when the habit of giving in stops hurting, and that's the most dangerous point of all. When you no longer feel the weight of what you're losing, it's because you've already lost too much. The numbed soul mistakes stillness for peace when it's really exhaustion, and only when a shock arrives, a loss, a failure, a betrayal, do you realize that the root of your fragility was in the ordinary, not the exceptional? This session doesn't seek to inspire you with pretty words. It seeks to show you a mirror that doesn't lie. Every habit we'll talk about today is not a sentence. It's a warning, an opportunity to observe yourself and recognize what you repeat without thought, what's draining your energy, your dignity, and your direction. The path to strength begins there, in the recognition of your weakness. There's no transformation without discomfort, nor clarity without confrontation. Breathe. Stay here. You're going to hear things that hurt, but also that free, because nothing strengthens you more than facing what you've been avoiding. And if you can do it without fear, if you can listen to yourself without justifying, then you'll have taken the first step towards ceasing to be a slave to your habits. No adornments, no excuses, no masks, just you facing yourself. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by writing in the comments, "From today, I will not feed what weakens me." That phrase will be your reminder, your inner boundary. Every time you repeat it, you'll remember that this session isn't just to listen, it's to awaken, that you are here to break the invisible habits that drain your strength, to stop being a victim of your routines, and to reclaim the power to govern yourself. Because today we're not here for fleeting motivation, we're here to face ourselves without excuses, to recognize what makes us small, what drains us, what numbs us. This is the moment to choose strength over comfort, discipline over distraction, and inner mastery over learned weakness. So repeat it consciously. From today, I will not feed what weakens me. And with that clear decision, without further preamble, we begin. First Stoic habit, seeking approval in everything. Living for the approval of others is one of the most silent forms of self-destruction. It's trading your freedom for someone else's smile. It's disguising fear as kindness and insecurity as empathy. And the worst part is that you do it convinced you're doing the right thing. But deep down, you know, every time you adjust yourself to be liked, you lose a little more of who you are. Every time you repress your truth to avoid making others uncomfortable, you empty yourself, because the need to please is a sweet poison. It gives you momentary acceptance but steals long-term authenticity. Stoicism teaches that true power doesn't lie in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be loved, love virtue. Do not love applause. Do not seek recognition. Love coherence, integrity, and the serenity that comes from acting according to reason, not according to the judgment of others. Because the judgment of others changes, but your conscience does not. And if you learn to live according to it, nothing external can disturb you. The most painful part is that this need for approval often disguises itself as virtue. You tell yourself that you're being empathetic, considerate, kind. But many times what you call kindness is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of losing affection or respect. And beneath that fear lies an uncomfortable truth. You don't trust your own worth. You don't believe your presence is enough without embellishment, without the effort to be liked. So you mold yourself, you adapt, you bend. But the soul was not made to shape itself to the world's opinions. It was made to express itself from its center, from its logos, from that spark of divine reason that, according to the Stoics, lives within us all. Seneca said it with brutal clarity, "No man can be happy who is too much concerned with what others think." And he was right. The constant search for approval is an endless source of anxiety, because even if you manage to please today, tomorrow someone will judge you again. The cycle never ends. And the more you try to please, the more you lose your identity. You end up playing so many roles that one day you no longer know which one is real. You become an actor who never leaves the stage, exhausted, smiling mechanically before an audience that never stops changing. But there is a way out, one that isn't found in applause but in silence, in the moment you dare not to be liked, in the instant you choose honesty over approval. That's where inner freedom begins. And yes, it will hurt. It hurts to disappoint. It hurts to feel like you're losing connections when you stop adapting. But what you're really losing are not true bonds. Their dependencies disguised as love. Those who only appreciate you when you're convenient don't appreciate you. They appreciate the version that makes them comfortable. The Stoic does not seek acceptance. He seeks coherence. He doesn't live to please. He lives to do what is right. And that changes everything. When you do the right thing without needing applause, your mind becomes unshakable. You discover that approval no longer lifts you, and criticism no longer sinks you. You become the master of your own mood. You begin to distinguish between what's within your control, your intention, your effort, your judgment, and what's not, others' perceptions, expectations, misunderstandings. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: you will be invincible if you do not compete for what does not depend on you. And that includes other people's opinions, because trying to control how others see you is like trying to command the wind. You can influence it, but you cannot decide it. Accepting this isn't resignation, it's maturity. It's understanding that serenity is born from no longer chasing what was never in your power. Look around you. Society feeds on approval, likes, followers, public recognition. Everyone competing for attention, confusing visibility with value. But the ancient sages didn't need applause to feel fulfilled. Their peace came from within, not from reflection in another's eyes. The Stoic sage acts silently, firmly, knowing that virtue itself is enough reward. Because he who lives with virtue doesn't need witnesses. His conscience is his own judge. Ask yourself how many times you've said yes when you wanted to say no. How many times you've changed your tone, your opinion, or even the way you dress just to avoid judgment. Each of those times you left a piece of yourself behind, but you can reclaim it. Start with one small act. Say what you think with respect, even if it's unpopular. Learn to endure the uncomfortable silence that follows a spoken truth. Let discomfort train you, because every discomfort you endure strengthens the soul. The next time you seek approval, remember this: the person who judges you today will also be judged tomorrow, and none of those judgments hold any weight unless you give it to them. Others' opinions are wind. Don't cling to the wind. Accept praise without swelling. Accept criticism without breaking. Be grateful, but don't depend. Because when you learn not to depend, you discover something no one ever told you. Solitude stops being a threat and becomes freedom. Living without seeking approval doesn't mean being insensitive. It means choosing from reason, not from fear. It means loving without lowering yourself, helping without erasing yourself, being kind without losing firmness. The wise man doesn't run from rejection. He understands it as part of the path, because even rejection teaches. It shows you who you are when you no longer have to pretend. And when you achieve that, when you can look at the world and say, whether they approve of me or not, I remain the same, you'll have reached the rarest kind of strength. Inner independence. Not arrogance, but serenity. Not hardness, but coherence. Applause stops being fuel because your fire no longer needs external oxygen. That is true Stoic freedom, to live according to your nature, guided by reason, not the crowd. Not to compete for admiration, but to strive for virtue, because everything else, fame, validation, judgment, are shadows that fade. The only thing that remains is character, and in the end, when the noise of the world fades away, only one question will remain: did you live by your principles or by the gaze of others? If you can answer calmly, without guilt, without fear, then you will have understood what the Stoics always knew, that the most valuable approval is not that of others, but that of your own conscience. Second Stoic habit, reacting without thinking. Most of the wounds you carry don't come from what others did to you, but from how you reacted. It was your impulse, not the event, that broke you. Because the moment you react without thinking, you hand over the command of your soul to chaos. The modern world pushes you to do so, to respond fast, to have an opinion immediately, to feel everything intensely. But emotional speed comes at a cost. The more you react, the less you choose. And the less you choose, the more you become a slave to your passions. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus taught that between the stimulus and the response, there exists a space, and in that space lives freedom. There, you decide whether the fire will burn you or illuminate you. Reaction is animal, reflection is human. The difference between those two paths is what separates ruin from serenity. Yet most people live without that space, responding as if the world were attacking them at all times. They react out of pride, fear, habit, but rarely by choice. Seneca wrote that anger is a brief madness. He wasn't exaggerating, because in the moment of reaction you lose your reason. Your mind ceases to be your ally and becomes a battlefield. You say things you don't mean, do things you later regret, all because you never learned to stop. Reaction is born from an untrained mind, a mind that chases every emotion like a dog chasing its shadow. Think about it. How many times was the real problem not what happened, but how you handled it? A word spoken wrong, a gesture misunderstood, a silence you didn't know how to hold. Most human conflicts are fires started by sparks of impulsivity. The wise person isn't one who feels no anger or pain, but one who isn't ruled by them. The difference between the two is not fate, but practice. The mind can be trained. The Stoic trains daily to master his first reaction. It's not about repressing, it's about understanding. Every emotion is information. It's not an enemy, but it shouldn't be the ruler either. When someone hurts you with a word, the undisciplined mind screams, "Respond, defend yourself, show them they can't humiliate you." But the trained mind breathes, observes, and asks, "Does this depend on me? Or is it just an external shadow moving before my eyes?" That pause is everything. Within it lies freedom, temperance, and wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, who had to endure betrayals, wars, and plagues, practiced it daily. In his journal he wrote, "When you are irritated by something, remember that the evil is not in the event, but in your judgment of it. What hurts is not the event itself, but your interpretation of it." The wise understand that insults, offenses, or others' mistakes are not attacks on their dignity, they are tests of their self-mastery. Whoever masters his reaction masters his destiny. But mastery isn't easy. Modern culture glorifies reaction. It teaches you that feeling intensely is authenticity, that responding fast makes you strong, that silence looks weak. We've been trained to react before we understand. That's why Stoicism feels so countercultural. It proposes silence in a world that shouts, pause in an age of immediacy, reason in a culture ruled by ego. Reaction comes from the desire for control. We try to impose order on reality through emotion. If something hurts, we respond with anger to avoid vulnerability. If something scares us, we respond with judgment to avoid fear. But that illusion of control is what makes us lose control. The wise understand that not everything requires a response. Sometimes the best defense is calm, silence, the serene gaze that refuses to be dragged into noise. Learning not to react is not apathy. It's choosing when your energy is worth using. Every unnecessary reaction steals your clarity. Every time you jump at the smallest stimulus, you step further from your center. And the further you are from that center, the more vulnerable you become. For the Stoics, temperance was the art of staying centered. The tempered mind doesn't deny emotion, it observes it, lets it pass, and acts only when reason has taken command. There's a practice Seneca recommended to his disciples. Before sleeping, review your day. Not to punish yourself, but to learn. Ask, at what moment did I react without thinking? What could I have done better? That daily self-examination wasn't moralism, it was mental training. Because self-mastery isn't won in a single epic battle, but in thousands of small silent victories. And here lies the hardest truth, not reacting also hurts. Silence, when emotion burns, feels like defeat. Pride demands a response. But the mature soul learns that not every battle deserves to be fought, that many times the best victory is not to participate, that winning control over yourself is more honorable than winning any argument. Epictetus said the mind must not be carried away by appearances, for appearances are deceptive. What you see as an offense might be an opportunity to grow in patience. What you feel as injustice might be training for your inner strength. It all depends on how you choose to see it. The automatic reaction closes that possibility. The pause opens it. And that pause is the soul of Stoicism. It isn't passivity, it's contained power. The wise man is not a cold stone, but a controlled flame. He burns but doesn't destroy. He feels but isn't enslaved. His calm doesn't come from the absence of emotion, but from having understood it so deeply that it no longer rules him. Imagine for a moment that every time something irritates you, you could stop for just 3 seconds before acting. 3 seconds, 3 conscious breaths. In that space, something changes. The emotion dissolves, the mind clears, the soul remembers it still commands itself. Not reacting becomes an act of spiritual elegance, a silent declaration of power, and little by little you discover you have nothing to prove, that you don't have to defend yourself from everything, that the world can burn and you can remain standing, watching, breathing, acting only when reason dictates. That is Stoic temperance, not indifference, but invulnerability to chaos. Next time something throws you off balance, don't respond immediately. See it as training. Ask yourself, does this require action or only attention? Learn to respond with intention, not reflex. The difference between the two is the measure of your freedom. Because when you react without thinking, you are a slave to others. But when you choose your response, you become master of yourself. That is the Stoic goal, not to live without emotion, but without emotional servitude. And when you achieve it, the world stops provoking you. Only then can you look at any storm and say, "Do what you will, I will not move." That calm isn't improvised, it's trained. Every pause is an act of power. Every conscious breath is a reminder that you are still in command. And in a world that confuses noise with strength, that serenity becomes the purest form of authority. Third Stoic habit, avoiding all discomfort. Comfort is the new modern god. We worship it in silence, no rituals, no temples, but with absolute devotion. We want shortcuts, results without effort, calm without discipline. We're terrified of friction, conflict, exhaustion. But no one becomes strong by avoiding weight. No one grows by running from pain. The body that's never tested grows weak, and the soul that's never uncomfortable withers. Comfort isn't a refuge, it's a narcotic that lulls you to sleep while time steals your potential. Stoicism was born out of discomfort. Zeno was shipwrecked, lost his fortune, and walked to Athens with nothing. Epictetus was a slave. Marcus Aurelius ruled a sick, war-torn empire. None of them chose external calm, but all found inner serenity, because they understood that suffering doesn't destroy you, running from it does. Discomfort, when faced with courage, is a teacher. It reveals what you're made of. A comfortable life, on the other hand, makes you forget who you are. Seneca warned that the soul weakens when it becomes accustomed to ease. Prosperity reveals vices that adversity does not permit. When everything comes easily, you don't see your limits. You don't know how strong you are because you've never been tested. But when life pushes you, when pain knocks on your door, when failure humbles your pride, there you find your true measure. Not the one you claim to have, but the one you actually practice. Modern society avoids discomfort with brutal efficiency. It avoids silence with noise, solitude with distraction, effort with entertainment, doubt with borrowed opinions. Everything is designed so you don't have to think, don't have to feel too much, don't have to stop, and when something hurts you rush to cover it, with food, with screens, with empty promises. But Stoicism teaches the opposite, to feel discomfort without running from it, to let it pass through you. Not because you're a masochist, but because only those who stay awake in pain can transform it. Marcus Aurelius wrote during the plague, "Why do you fear what is natural? Nature does not harm you, it trains you. What's natural isn't a life free of hardship, it's learning to move with it. Discomfort isn't punishment, it's the soul's training ground. Every obstacle, every loss, every moment of waiting is an opportunity to strengthen temperance. But to do that, you must first stop fleeing." The habit of avoiding discomfort steals 3 essential virtues: discipline, gratitude, and fortitude. Without discipline, you surrender at the first obstacle. Without gratitude, you see every difficulty as injustice. Without fortitude, the smallest setback crushes you. Comfort doesn't just weaken the body, it softens the mind. It makes you demanding of the world, but indulgent with yourself. You want great results with little sacrifice. You want admiration without merit. You want peace without learning to face chaos. Epictetus taught his students to rehearse hardship. He asked them to endure the cold, to eat modestly, to sleep less sometimes, not to suffer, but to remember they could endure. Because when the soul trains in calm times, it doesn't break in stormy ones. Today we do the opposite. We soften everything that hurts, numb everything that's uncomfortable. And without realizing it, we grow fragile. The slightest criticism wounds us. An unexpected change destabilizes us. A silence makes us anxious. We've confused well-being with weakness. The Stoic doesn't seek pain, but neither does he fear it. He accepts it as part of nature's order. He knows life doesn't promise comfort. It promises movement. Nothing in nature is still. Rivers carve rock, trees resist wind, mountains endure centuries of erosion. Life stays alive because it submits to change. Only modern humans believe they can live without discomfort and still grow. But discomfort is the price of authenticity. Telling the truth is uncomfortable. Changing habits is uncomfortable. Setting boundaries is uncomfortable. Forgiving is uncomfortable. Waiting is uncomfortable. Loving deeply is uncomfortable. But all those discomforts bring you closer to freedom, and each time you avoid them, you choose to remain a prisoner. Discomfort, like fever, is not the illness. It's the signal that you're healing. Think about how many decisions you've postponed out of fear of discomfort, how many conversations you've avoided, how many times you've chosen to settle instead of facing the tension of change. And now ask yourself, how much has that avoidance cost you? The discomfort you dodge today becomes the frustration you'll carry tomorrow. The Stoics didn't expect an easy path. They expected to be strong. That difference changes everything. Seneca advised alternating abundance with scarcity, luxury with austerity, so you wouldn't become a slave to either. He wrote, "Train yourself in poverty so that you do not fear it when it arrives." That practice today would seem almost unthinkable, but the wisdom remains the same. The only way to overcome fear is to face it. Voluntary discomfort builds confidence. Constant comfort erases it. Start with small things. Get up without hitting snooze. Finish what you start. Face a hard conversation without waiting for the perfect moment. Don't rush to find comfort every time something bothers you. Stay with the unease a few seconds longer. Right there, on that edge, is where your character grows. Discomfort, when used well, educates you. Prolonged comfort infantilizes you. The Stoics saw discomfort as a path to freedom, because the one who can endure cold, solitude, or criticism without breaking no longer depends on weather, company, or praise. The wise person doesn't need the world to be perfect to be at peace. He is at peace because his strength doesn't depend on external conditions. That's the goal, a soul steady under any circumstance. Marcus Aurelius summed it up. The obstacle becomes the way. What bothers you today will be your advantage tomorrow. What challenges you today will sustain you tomorrow. Every discomfort you overcome expands your capacity for serenity, and when you learn to live without avoidance, life stops intimidating you. The next time something makes you uncomfortable, don't run. Breathe. Look at it as a teacher. Ask yourself what it's trying to show you. Because discomfort doesn't come to punish you, it comes to purify you. And if you have the courage to stay with it, you'll discover something comfort can never offer: unbreakable peace, born not from the absence of difficulty, but from your ability to embrace it. The soul that avoids discomfort stays asleep. The soul that faces it awakens. And when you awaken, fear dissolves, complaint fades, and you understand what the Stoics repeated for centuries. Strength is not inherited, it is trained, and nothing worth growing will ever thrive in comfortable soil. Fourth Stoic habit: complaining out of habit. Complaining doesn't change your destiny, it only makes it heavier. Complaint is the voice of a mind that has forgotten its power. It's an act of surrender disguised as relief. You do it without realizing, upon waking, while talking, comparing, observing. You complain about the weather, the traffic, the job, your body, the country, other people. And little by little, without noticing, complaint becomes your native language. You don't speak to solve, you speak to lament. But what you ignore is that every repeated word shapes your soul, and when complaint becomes habit, life begins to obey that tone. Seneca wrote, "Nothing becomes unbearable if you accept it with serenity." But complaint destroys that serenity because it feeds resistance. The more you resist what already is, the more you suffer. Complaint traps you in a cycle without escape. The more you talk about the problem, the bigger it grows. The bigger it grows, the less you act. It steals action and leaves you noise. It's a way of delegating responsibility. You blame the world, others' fate. And thus, you free yourself momentarily from the burden, but you also renounce your power. The Stoics didn't deny pain, but they didn't magnify it either. They knew how to distinguish between the fact and the interpretation. They would say, "This hurts me, but it doesn't destroy me." Complaint, on the other hand, turns every small discomfort into a tragedy. It feeds helplessness and distorts reality. And worst of all, it's contagious. A person who complains constantly not only poisons their own spirit, but also that of others. It's like breathing stale air without noticing. You get used to it, but it still makes you sick. Epictetus said it plainly: "Do not demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do. In that acceptance lies freedom, but while you complain, you live at war with the inevitable. And in that war, there's only one loser: you. Because the world doesn't change because you complain. It changes when you act, or when you learn to see differently. Complaint is sterile, action is fertile. The habit of complaining is born from the desire to control everything. You get irritated when things don't go as you imagined, but that desire is precisely what the Stoics considered a dangerous illusion. The wise person doesn't need everything to go well. He needs to be well, no matter how things go. That's why complaint is a sign of emotional immaturity. It reveals a mind that hasn't yet accepted its impotence before the external. Complaint can also be a form of manipulation. You seek attention, comfort, compassion, but that attention becomes dependency, and what seemed like relief becomes a chain, because now, on top of your problems, you carry the expectation that someone else will solve them for you. The Stoic breaks that pattern. He doesn't seek comfort, he seeks clarity. He doesn't seek relief, he seeks virtue. Seneca taught how to turn adversity into an exercise in greatness. When faced with a setback, he would ask, "What can I learn from this? What virtue can I practice here?" Every problem became training, and that attitude made him invincible. While others complained, he grew. Complaint stagnates, reflection elevates. Where one sees injustice, the other sees opportunity. That difference is everything. Complaint is comfortable because it demands no effort. It's easy to lament, hard to act. Easy to blame, hard to assume. But Stoicism teaches that the price of emotional comfort is inner slavery. Every time you choose to complain instead of act, you reinforce the idea that you're a victim. And the victim's mind can never be free because it always needs someone to blame. The wise, on the other hand, takes responsibility even for what he didn't cause, not out of masochism, but mastery, because by taking ownership, he regains control. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the known world, faced betrayals, plagues, and unimaginable losses. Yet in his journal there are no complaints, only reflections. He wrote, "What good does lamenting do? If you can change it, do so. If not, endure and be just." That phrase contains the essence of Stoic philosophy. Complaining is using your energy against yourself. Enduring with dignity, however, makes you invulnerable. But there's a subtler kind of complaint, the one that sounds rational. You say you're just analyzing, venting, commenting. But behind those words hides the same habit of resistance. It's not about silencing injustice, but about learning to separate release from self-deception. You can express pain without turning it into identity. You can acknowledge frustration without surrendering to it. That's the difference between the wise and the ordinary. The former feels the same, but chooses not to become his emotion. Practicing silence is the Stoic medicine against complaint. Not the silence that represses, but the silence that observes. When something bothers you, hold back the reaction. Wait. Breathe. Ask yourself, does this depend on me? If the answer is no, accept it and move on. If the answer is yes, act without losing calm. Every time you choose active silence over passive complaint, your character strengthens. Complaint is noise of the soul. Silence, on the other hand, is its cleansing. In silence, you discover that many of your irritations were just repeated thoughts, that what you believed unbearable was only an untrained interpretation. The mind that quiets itself learns. The mind that complains stagnates. Epictetus said that people are not disturbed by things, but by the opinions they have about things. Complaint is that unexamined opinion, that story you repeat without questioning. Changing the story is changing your state, and that's done through awareness. Start by observing yourself. Don't try to stop complaining all at once. Just notice when you do it, how your tone changes, how your body tenses. You'll see that many times you complain out of inertia, not necessity. It's a learned reflex, but every reflex can be unlearned. Replace complaint with gratitude, not because everything is fine, but because you choose to focus on what you can still value. Gratitude is the antidote to complaint. Where gratitude exists, bitterness cannot. You can't be thankful and resentful at the same time. They are incompatible states. Each time you practice gratitude, you deactivate the mechanism of complaint. You start seeing what remains, not what's missing, and that transforms your entire perception of the world. Seneca summed it up perfectly. The wise man does not grieve for what he does not have, but rejoices in what he has. That's the secret. You don't need the world to change, only your focus. The next time complaint tempts you, replace it with a question. What can I do right now that brings me closer to virtue? That question pulls you out of the circle of lament and returns you to the present, where your power has always been. And when you succeed, when you learn to look at pain without turning it into speech, something inside you becomes still. You discover that silence is not emptiness, it is contained strength. That serenity is not resignation, it is inner sovereignty, and you finally understand that complaint was never the relief you thought, it was the prison. Fifth, Stoic habit, postponing what matters. You think you have time, and that is the greatest illusion of all. You say, I'll start tomorrow, when I have more energy, when things calm down. But tomorrow doesn't exist. It's a promise that fate can break at any moment. While you wait for the perfect moment, life moves on. And when you finally try to catch up, you realize it waits for no one. Postponing what matters is the most subtle way to waste your life. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't scandalize, it leaves no visible scars, but it kills quietly, minute by minute, with the calm of slow poison. Seneca warned with brutal clarity, while we postpone, life speeds by. And that sentence should hurt. Because what you postpone isn't a task or a project, it's your own growth. Every time you delay a decision, a conversation, or an action you know is necessary, you hand fear the command of your destiny. You don't postpone for lack of time, you postpone because of excess fear. Fear of failure, of change, of judgment. But time doesn't wait for you to resolve it. Procrastination doesn't stop the wheel, it just leaves you spinning inside it. The Stoic understands that time is his most sacred resource. Marcus Aurelius repeated it in his meditations, "Act now." Don't talk about what a good man should be one. Because the soul that delays begins to fragment. It loses coherence, it loses presence. Every postponement is an invisible surrender. You know it, you wanted to write, to forgive, to change direction. But you convinced yourself it would be easier later. And so, later became your way of life. Epictetus taught that no man is free who depends on tomorrow, and you depend on it every time you wait, because waiting isn't patience, it's a form of escape. Stoic patience is active, it means acting calmly within circumstances. But postponing what matters is an illusion of control. You think you're managing time, but time is managing you. The habit of postponing comes from the desire for comfort, not from exhaustion, but from fear of emotional effort. You're not delaying the act, you're delaying the discomfort that comes with it. You're delaying the risk of failure, the weight of commitment, the vertigo of leaving your comfort zone. But that false protection becomes a prison. The time you avoid facing is the same time that steals your freedom. The life of a Stoic is a war against inertia. Not a violent war, but an inner one, against the voice that says, later, not today, I'm not ready. That voice isn't prudence, it's cowardice, disguised as logic. The mind will always offer reasons not to act. It will tell you you're not ready, that it's not the right time, that you need to think more. But behind those excuses hides fear, fear of failure and fear of success. Because action forces responsibility, and that weighs more than failure itself. Seneca said, "It is not that we have little time, but that we waste much." Think about how many hours you've given to fear, distraction, indecision. You'll never get them back. Stoicism doesn't seek to make you feel guilty. It seeks to awaken urgency. Urgency to live with intention. Urgency to stop being a spectator. Wisdom isn't knowing what to do. It's doing it without delay. Procrastination has an even deeper trap, the illusion of productivity. You fill your day with small tasks to feel busy, but avoid the one that truly matters. You answer emails, clean the house, check your phone. You do everything except the essential, and at the end of the day, you feel exhausted but not fulfilled. It's the fatigue of someone who's run a lot without moving forward. The wise avoid this. They distinguish between what's urgent and what's important, and they act without delay on what defines their life. The Stoics had a daily mental exercise to imagine that the day beginning could be their last, not to live in fear, but in clarity. If you knew there was no tomorrow, what would you still postpone? What conversation would you have today? What decision would you take without hesitation? That perspective cuts through the illusion of time. Death, for them, wasn't tragedy, it was a teacher. It reminded them that living isn't existing, it's acting. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Stop wasting time arguing about what a good man should be one." Every time you read that line, remember, thought without action is self-deception. Knowing what to do and not doing it weakens you. Every delay reinforces mental laziness, and mental laziness isn't cured with motivation, it's cured with decision. The Stoic doesn't seek motivation, he seeks discipline. He knows that emotion fluctuates, but steady action conquers any state. Seneca recommended acting even without desire, because desire comes after movement, not before. Begin, and the spirit will follow, he said. Every step cuts a chain. Every act completed brings you closer to peace, because nothing calms the soul more than fulfilling what you know you must do. Postponing what matters also weakens self-trust. Every time you say tomorrow and don't follow through, you teach yourself that your word means nothing, and the soul gets used to not believing itself. That inner disbelief is the root of insecurity. You become a stranger to yourself. But when you do what you said you would, even a small act, you rebuild self-respect. And that respect is the foundation of all strength. Epictetus summed it up. Don't promise to be a philosopher, act like one. Because talking about virtue without practicing it is the most dangerous self-deception. The habit of postponing steals that coherence. It turns you into an expert in intentions, but a beginner in results. The wise prefer to move 1 inch each day than to imagine miles of change without moving at all. To break this habit, the Stoic practices 3 things: clarity, action, and closure. Clarity to distinguish the essential from the trivial. Immediate action on what depends on him, and daily closure to avoid leaving loose ends in his mind. That structure keeps the soul from dissolving into distraction, because distraction is the fertile ground of anxiety. If something steals your peace because it's pending, do it. If something drains your energy because you keep postponing it, face it. If something makes you feel guilt, resolve it. Action, when born from reason, is medicine, but delay only prolongs the disease. You don't need to do everything today, but you do need to start today, because every beginning, no matter how small, is a declaration: time will not dominate me. And when you understand that, something changes. You stop waiting for perfect motivation, the ideal moment, the divine sign. You begin to live with calm urgency, with a serenity that doesn't procrastinate. Not because you fear losing life, but because you finally value it. Always remember Seneca's words: hasten to live well, and think that each day is a complete life. Don't postpone your transformation. Don't postpone your purpose. Don't postpone your peace, because every delay is a small death, and every action, no matter how small, is a resurrection. 6th Stoic habit: talking more than you act. Talking about what you're going to do is the first step toward not doing it. Words give you the illusion of progress. They make you feel as though you've taken a step forward when you've only imagined it. You say, I'm going to start working out. I'm going to leave that relationship. I'm going to launch my project. And for a few minutes, you feel the relief of having acted. But you've done nothing. The mind confuses intention with action, promise with progress. And while you talk, time keeps moving. The ego feeds on noise, but virtue strengthens in silence. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy, embody it, because speaking of virtue without practicing it is like lighting a lamp without oil. It glows for an instant and then goes out. Seneca said that the wise man doesn't promise, he proves. He doesn't preach temperance, he embodies it through calm. He doesn't need to convince, his coherence convinces for him. Those who talk too much about their purpose are often trying to compensate for their lack of action, and those who truly act rarely have time to explain themselves. We live in the age of talk. Everyone says who they are, what they'll do, what they believe, but few lives confirm their words. We show projects before starting them, share ideas before maturing them, seek validation before results. The need to display has replaced the need to become. And without realizing it, we've turned noise into identity. Talking more than you act weakens you because it drains the energy of action. The enthusiasm that should go into movement you spend on narration. And by narrating, you already receive part of the reward: attention, recognition, the sensation of progress. But it's a hollow reward. Early approval kills discipline. The wise person, on the other hand, keeps silent until his actions speak for him. Not because he is cold or distant, but because he knows that effort loses force when dispersed in words. Seneca explained it precisely. It is the mark of a great soul to act, not to talk. Constant noise, he said, is the symptom of a restless mind, one that cannot hold its purpose without witnesses. But inner greatness grows in secret. Roots make no sound as they break through the earth, yet they sustain everything above. The wise are like those roots, invisible, silent, essential. Speaking without acting also corrupts your trust in yourself. Each time you say something and don't follow through, your word loses value, not only to others, but to you. You promise and don't deliver, plan and don't execute, announce and don't complete. Slowly, your unconscious learns that your words mean nothing. You become a storyteller of intentions, not a doer of actions. And without action, self-esteem collapses, because the mind only trusts what it can verify. Epictetus summed it up. What makes a man good is not what he says, but what he does repeatedly. Words don't form character, actions do. And character was the only thing the Stoics considered truly valuable. Everything else, fame, reputation, opinion, is external and therefore indifferent. But character is your inner fortress. It's what sustains you when everything else falls apart. Talking more than you act is also a form of fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of silence. You think that by speaking your plans they'll become real. But the world doesn't reward declarations. It rewards consistency. The uncomfortable silence before starting something new isn't emptiness. It's gestation. It's the space where willpower strengthens before exposure. The Stoic doesn't flee that silence. He inhabits it. Think about how much time you've wasted explaining what you're going to do instead of doing it. How many people you've told your goals to, hoping for motivation or applause. But early applause weakens you. It makes you feel you've arrived before you've walked. The purest motivation doesn't come from recognition, but from the inner need to live according to reason. If you act only when others are watching, your virtue depends on their gaze. Marcus Aurelius said it sternly, "Stop talking about what the good man should be. Be one. Every time you speak more than you practice, you move further from coherence." The man or woman aligned with their logos doesn't need to justify their conduct. Their serenity says everything. But the one who talks excessively shows that the mind has not yet found rest. Outer noise is a reflection of inner disorder. The discipline of silence is one of the hardest to practice. It's not about repressing, it's about focusing. The wise person doesn't stay silent out of fear, but out of respect for their own energy. They know every word is a seed, and not all deserve to be planted. That's why the Stoics trained their speech as they trained their minds, with intention. Say less, mean more. Seneca advised reviewing each day's words. Were they necessary? Were they true? Were they useful? If they didn't pass that test, they were noise. And noise, even the most harmless kind, erodes clarity. The mind saturated with words loses direction, but well-used silence becomes a compass. Talking more than you act also weakens relationships. When you promise more than you deliver, others stop trusting you. And when you talk about yourself constantly, you leave no space to listen. The wise listen more than they speak, because they know learning grows from attentive silence, not endless speech. The Stoic lives so that his deeds speak for him, his serenity, his temperance, his capacity to act justly without seeking recognition. That is achieved not with speeches, but with daily practice. If you help, do it quietly. If you change, let them notice without you saying it. If you decide, let your decision need no defense. That invisible coherence is the root of respect. Seneca said that the wise live without display and display without talking. That's the goal, a life so integrated it requires no explanation, because words lose value when not backed by action. And action, even the smallest, has a power that 1,000 speeches can't reach. Be silent, not to hide, but to focus your energy on what matters. Use your words as instruments of precision, not background noise. Let your silence be the space where your actions grow. Don't explain your plans, execute them. Don't seek approval, seek coherence. Don't say you'll change, change. And when someone asks what you're doing, you can answer calmly, I'm working on it, because the wise don't announce, they act. And in that silent act lies true freedom. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be silent forever. It asks you to speak when your words are necessary and to live so your deeds speak for you. Noise promises, action proves. And the silence that accompanies steady work becomes music for the soul, the melody of someone who no longer needs to convince because they have become their own example. Seventh Stoic habit: blaming others. As long as you keep blaming someone, you will remain a slave. That is the truth no one wants to hear. Projected blame is an invisible prison. It allows you to feel innocent, but it condemns you to powerlessness. When you make someone else responsible for your state, your pain, or your destiny, you give up the only power you truly have, the power to rule yourself. You think you are freeing yourself, but what you're really doing is surrendering the helm. And the worst part, the more you blame, the smaller you become. The Stoics never denied suffering. They knew that life wounds, that people fail, that fate strikes without warning. But they also knew that nothing external can take away your inner freedom without your consent. Epictetus, who was born a slave, said it with fierce clarity: "No man is free unless he can master himself. No one can harm you without your permission." And if a chained man could say that without bitterness, what excuse remains for us? Blame is a refined form of weakness. The mind disguises it as justice, analysis, or memory, but at its core it is fear. Fear of looking inward, fear of recognizing your part in the story, fear of admitting that you also chose, tolerated, stayed silent when you should have spoken. External blame soothes for a moment, but enslaves for life, because everything you attribute to another lies beyond your reach. Seneca warned, "The wise man does not grieve over what he cannot control, but the one who blames grieves endlessly." He settles into the role of victim because there he doesn't have to act, only suffer. The victim enjoys an emotional privilege, the right to do nothing. As long as someone else is guilty, change depends on the world, not on you. And that's comfortable, but destructive. When you blame, you hand over your keys. You give others the power to define you. If you believe your peace depends on what someone did, that person still governs your soul, even if they're gone. If you think your success depends on those who denied you something, you remain tied to the past. The wise, instead, cut that invisible thread, not because the other didn't fail, but because they decide their life won't be a memorial to harm. Epictetus taught that the difference between the wise and the foolish lies in focus. The fool looks outward and complains. The wise looks inward and disciplines himself. You cannot prevent others from hurting you, but you can decide what to do with that wound. Blame keeps you spinning in the same place. Responsibility sets you free. To assume responsibility doesn't mean approving what's unjust. It means reclaiming your power to transform it. Blame can also be a form of pride. You believe you deserved something different, that the world failed you. But the world doesn't promise justice. It promises existence. The Stoics saw reality as a river. You can't blame the water for flowing or the fire for burning. You can only learn to navigate or protect yourself. When you blame the river for making you wet, you reveal you still haven't understood its nature, and that misunderstanding keeps you in constant struggle. Seneca wrote, "He who complains about circumstances has not yet learned his own strength." Circumstances are neutral. What colors them is your judgment. If someone offended you, that act belongs to them, but your interpretation of it belongs to you. If you choose to stay in anger, you perpetuate the damage. If you choose to learn, you turn the blow into training. The habit of blaming comes with a hidden cost. It robs you of the possibility of growth. Because as long as you think the problem is outside, you'll never look within. And the soul that doesn't examine itself repeats. It repeats mistakes, relationships, decisions, downfalls. It changes scenery, but not the pattern. The same conflict reappears with a different face until you decide to look at yourself without excuses. Marcus Aurelius, who was betrayed, slandered, and surrounded by corruption, never wrote a single line of reproach. In his meditations there are no names, only lessons. He wrote, "If men act wrongly, it is because they know no better. Teach them, or bear with them. That is the greatness of the Stoic soul, to turn wounds into understanding, not resentment. Because resentment is poison served in the cup of reason. You think it gives you strength, but it only consumes you. Blaming also fractures relationships. It makes you see enemies where there are only imperfect human beings. Instead of understanding, you attack. Instead of dialoguing, you judge. Hurt pride disguises itself as morality. But the wise prefer inner peace to outward victory, because they know that whoever wins the argument but loses their calm has been defeated all the same. Stoicism teaches you to replace blame with cause. Instead of asking, "Why did they do this to me?" ask, "What can I use this for?" The difference is subtle but transformative. The first keeps you trapped in the past. The second moves you into the present. A responsible mind finds purpose even in loss, not because it enjoys suffering, but because it refuses to suffer in vain. Seneca expressed it clearly. Nothing is misfortune if it is accepted with serenity. The wise do not blame fate. They use it. They don't ask, "Why me?" but "What can I learn from this?" That question turns them into masters of pain, not victims of it. Every experience, good or bad, becomes material for practice. Blame also erodes gratitude. Those who live pointing fingers forget what they still have. The soul obsessed with justice grows weary because the world will never arrange itself to its liking. Serenity begins when you accept that you don't need everything to be fair in order to be at peace. Universal justice doesn't reside in the world, it resides in your response to it. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be invincible, don't fight for what doesn't depend on you." Blame is precisely that, fighting for what doesn't depend on you. Waiting for others to repent, for the past to undo itself, for the wound to be healed from the outside. But none of that is within your control. What is within your control is how you live from now on. That's the only true justice, not repeating what once hurt you. The wise do not blame, they assume. And in assuming, they recover their dignity, not because they are guilty, but because they are free. Because they understand that responsibility is not a burden, it's sovereignty. Inner freedom begins when you stop expecting repair, when you decide your well-being won't be negotiated with the past, when you tell yourself, "This happened to me, but it doesn't define me." And then something breaks, and something heals. You realize that forgiveness is not for the other, it's for you. That letting go of blame doesn't absolve the guilty, it restores your soul. That continuing to hate is continuing to obey. And that true strength doesn't lie in revenge, but in ceasing to carry the story. The next time your mind looks for someone to blame, pause. Ask yourself, what part of this can I control? If the answer is none, let it go. If the answer is something, do it. But don't surrender your power to complaint again. Don't turn your wound into a flag. Don't let the past keep writing your present. Always remember Marcus Aurelius's words. What stands in the way becomes the way. The obstacle is training, the wound, the teacher, the offense, the field where your virtue is tested. Don't seek blame, seek purpose. Don't demand justice, practice balance. Don't expect repair, cultivate understanding. And when you can finally do that, you'll discover something immense. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's emotional intelligence. Letting go of blame isn't surrender, it's liberation. And serenity, that peace you thought impossible, doesn't arrive when the world changes. It arrives when you change how you see it. 8th Stoic habit, wasting time on distractions. Nothing is wasted more lightly than time, and yet it's the only thing you can never recover. You can lose money and earn it again, lose friends and find new ones, even lose health and regain some of it. But time slips away silently. It doesn't fall, it doesn't explode, it leaves no trace, it simply disappears while you're distracted. We live distracted. But the worst part isn't that the world distracts us, it's that we allow it. Seneca wrote it 2,000 years ago, and it still sounds like he's speaking directly to you. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. He said it in On the Shortness of Life, a letter addressed to men who believed that living was the same as existing. And that's the great modern confusion. Existing is biology, living is consciousness. Distraction is living halfway. It's being present, but not truly there. It's moving through the day with your body awake, but your mind on autopilot. You wake up and immediately check your screen, jumping from notification to notification, as if every fragment of noise mattered more than your own thought. Distraction is the new slavery, not enforced by chains, but by stimuli. Epictetus said that a mind without direction is like a ship without a rudder. No matter how strong the wind, it will always crash. And the modern wind is made of distractions. Small, constant, seductive. None of them seem dangerous on their own, but together they devour your days. The danger of distractions isn't their size, it's their accumulation. One distraction steals seconds, 1,000 steal your purpose. The anxious mind seeks escape, not focus. And the soul that doesn't know how to rest in itself seeks refuge in noise. Scrolling endlessly, binge-watching shows, debating trivialities, filling your schedule with meaningless tasks. These are not signs of life, but of evasion. The wise know this. That's why Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by politics and chaos, stopped each night to write, "Pause. Examine your mind. Where have you truly been today?" That question is brutal. Where have you truly been today? In your actions or in your screens? In your purpose or in your distractions? Because you don't live the time that passes through you. You live the time you actually inhabit. And if your attention belongs to noise, so does your life. Stoicism teaches that attention is the gateway to the soul. Everything you let in through it becomes part of you. That's why the wise are careful about what they watch, read, listen to, and discuss. Not out of elitism, but out of mental hygiene. The mind, like the body, sickens when it consumes junk. The problem today isn't lack of information, it's excess of the irrelevant. Distraction is a quiet surrender of your power to the present. Seneca called it the disease of the busy, being constantly active but without meaning. You think movement equals progress, but motion without direction only exhausts you, and the tired soul becomes fragile, reactive, restless. You don't need more to do, you need more intention. The wise don't avoid the world, they decide what in the world deserves their time. Distraction isn't only in the phone or the television, it's also in the scattered mind, in the inner dialogue that won't stop, in the guilt of the past and the anxiety of the future. Every time you lose yourself in what you can't change or control, you're distracted from the only real thing, this moment. Epictetus insisted, when you find yourself distracted, remind yourself that you have been carried away from yourself. In other words, you've left your center unguarded. And when the mind has no guardian, any stimulus takes control. That's why Stoicism doesn't seek isolation. It trains you to return to yourself again and again. One of the oldest Stoic practices was prosauche, continuous attention. It wasn't about absolute concentration, but active awareness, observing yourself as you act, eating, walking, writing, conversing, but with presence. Because distraction isn't defeated by eliminating stimuli, but by cultivating awareness. You don't need outer silence if you can achieve inner silence. The distracted soul lives at the mercy of its surroundings. It reacts, imitates, compares, and exhausts itself. Mental fatigue disguises itself as boredom. You seek new distractions, new screens, new noise, and the cycle repeats. Distraction promises rest, but only postpones emptiness. You won't find rest by adding more noise, but by learning to hold silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, Nothing belongs to man more than his time, and yet we are generous with it to the point of waste. We give it away to algorithms, to other people's opinions, to soulless conversations, to useless conflicts. Distraction is the daily looting of the spirit. No one robs you more than your own lack of focus. The Stoic doesn't despise leisure, he dignifies it. Seneca called it otium honestum, noble leisure, time spent learning, reflecting, creating, meditating, leisure that nourishes, not numbs. Today we confuse rest with escape. True rest isn't running away from the world, it's reconnecting with it. Real rest restores direction. If you observe your day honestly, you'll see that distractions don't come alone. They're shelters from discomfort. You seek entertainment when you can't stand yourself. You seek noise when you fear your thoughts. You seek digital company when silence makes you uneasy. But what you avoid is precisely what you need to face. The wise don't flee from the void. They inhabit it until it turns into clarity. Learning not to be distracted is learning to live, not because you eliminate every stimulus, but because you choose the essential. Attention is a muscle, and every time you train it with purpose, you regain power. Each moment of presence is an affirmation of freedom. Every time you say no to the superficial, you say yes to your soul. Try this Stoic exercise. At the end of the day, review your time. Ask yourself, how much of what I did today deserved my attention? If the answer hurts, don't punish yourself. Be grateful for the awareness. The recognition of waste is the first step toward discipline. Tomorrow you'll have another chance to live awake. Seneca said that the wise man measures his day by the quality of his mind, not the quantity of his tasks. No one can be called busy if his soul is still, he wrote. That stillness is not passivity, it's mastery, because to master your attention is to master your destiny. Remember this, distractions don't steal your life all at once. They take it in installments, minute by minute, click by click, until one day you wake up not knowing where it went. But you still have time. You always do as long as you breathe. Return to yourself. Close what scatters you. Open a book. Write a thought, observe your breath, look at the sky without recording it, feel the silence without filling it. In those small acts begins freedom. Because freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's choosing where to place your attention. And when you finally do, you'll notice something remarkable. The world doesn't slow down, but you do. You no longer chase the noise. You walk within yourself. You no longer lose time. You inhabit it. You no longer get distracted because you've finally understood that what's truly valuable never makes noise. Ninth Stoic habit, forgetting gratitude. Few things weaken the soul as much as forgetting what you already have. The human mind is expert at focusing on what's missing, counting lacks, turning every achievement into normality and every difficulty into tragedy. It's a bias as old as fear itself. Survival once depended on spotting danger, not on appreciating safety. But what once protected the body in the wilderness has become poison for the soul in the city. Today, wild beasts no longer devour us, our thoughts do. Seneca said it with painful clarity. We complain about what we lack instead of rejoicing in what we have. And that's not a quote for a coffee mug. It's a philosophical warning. Because every time you forget to give thanks, you disconnect from the present and surrender to anxiety. The ungrateful mind never rests. It lives projected toward what it doesn't yet have. But the grateful soul anchors itself. It finds rest even in the middle of the storm. Forgetting gratitude weakens you because it blinds you to reality. It makes you believe that life owes you something, when in truth you breathe a loan you never requested. It makes you look at the table and see what's missing, not what's there. It makes you look at people and notice their flaws, not their presence. It makes you wake up thinking of what you haven't achieved, instead of the simple fact that you woke up. The Stoics saw gratitude as a form of reason, not a sentimental gesture, but a philosophical stance toward existence. Epictetus taught, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Gratitude is the art of reducing your demands and discovering that you already have enough. He who gives thanks governs his mind. He who demands enslaves it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this each morning. Before opening his eyes, he would mentally list what he should be grateful for: the air, the body, the sun, duty, even difficulties. He wrote, "Today I will meet the ungrateful, the arrogant, the envious, and yet I thank the day." Because he understood that gratitude is not a reward for good days, but a choice that transforms bad ones. To forget gratitude is to lose perspective, to see from the wound instead of from wisdom. When something goes wrong, the hurried mind says, "Why me?" The wise instead ask, "What can I learn from this?" The difference between those two questions is the soil in which serenity grows. Gratitude doesn't deny pain, it illuminates it. Seneca wrote in On Benefits that to give thanks is the noblest and most neglected of duties. He warned that those who don't know how to be grateful don't know how to live among others. Gratitude is the invisible cement of community. It unites without demanding, recognizes without humiliating, honors without expecting. An ungrateful society collapses because no one feels part of anything. The same happens with the soul. The ungrateful man is alone, even in company. Sometimes you forget gratitude because you confuse routine with entitlement. You think people will always be there, that health is permanent, that time will not run out. But life, with its brutal pedagogy, teaches the opposite. Everything is borrowed. And when you lose it, you remember it was never yours. Gratitude, then, is not mere courtesy. It is wisdom in advance, to give thanks before you lose. The Stoics practiced a powerful exercise called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortunes, not to obsess, but to value. Each night they imagined losing what they loved: family, possessions, health, and by doing so, they woke the next day seeing the world with new eyes. What once seemed ordinary became miraculous. Far from pessimism, it was training for conscious gratitude. Epictetus taught, when you kiss your child, remind yourself he may die tomorrow, not as a curse, but as a tender reminder. Love without guarantees. Give thanks without conditions. For when you forget that everything can change, you become arrogant. But when you remember the fragility of all things, every moment becomes sacred. Ingratitude often disguises itself as perfectionism. You chase the ideal so hard that you fail to see your progress. You demand so much from yourself that you forget what you've already achieved. The perfectionist soul doesn't celebrate, it postpones. It is always almost there, never at peace with. That perpetual state of inner lack breeds anxiety, dissatisfaction, and fatigue. The Stoic, in contrast, celebrates the attempt, honors the path, and gives thanks for the chance to improve. Seneca wrote, "No wind is favorable to one who does not know where he is sailing." But we could also say, no joy is possible for one who never looks back at how far he has come. Gratitude restores perspective. It reminds you that you've survived what once seemed impossible, that you are still here, that the very fact of reflection is a victory. Forgetting gratitude distances you from serenity because it throws you into endless desire. He who does not give thanks desires more, and he who desires without limit suffers. The Stoics did not seek to destroy desire, but to domesticate it. Gratitude is that domestication, to look around and say, this is enough for today. It's not resignation, it's mastery. Practicing gratitude requires no ritual. You only need to pause and recognize what already is. Every breath is a lesson in gratitude. It enters, gives you life, and leaves without asking for anything. That should be our attitude toward the world, to take what comes, enjoy it while it lasts, and let it go without resentment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything that happens is good if you receive it with virtue." Gratitude is that virtue. It doesn't change what happens, it changes how you live it. It's the lens that turns adversity into meaning, routine into presence, and chaos into clarity. Try this. Before you sleep, recall 3 things that went well today. No matter how small: a calm conversation, a ray of sunlight, a simple meal. Write them down or whisper them softly. It's a humble act, but a powerful one, because the soul that gives thanks before sleeping awakens stronger. Gratitude doesn't deny the harshness of life. It chooses not to harden with it. You cannot control fate, but you can decide how to receive it. And to receive it with gratitude is to turn even the darkest day into a lesson in wisdom. The Stoic who practices gratitude doesn't need much, but enjoys everything. Not because life is easy, but because he's learned to see value in simplicity. A cup of water becomes a miracle if you remember you might not have had it. An honest conversation becomes a treasure if you remember how many times you endured forced silence. To forget gratitude is to forget who you are. To give thanks is to return to yourself, to reconnect with the present, with others, and with the invisible source sustaining your life. Epictetus closed his teachings with a prayer. Give thanks to the gods for everything, for even what you do not wish for may serve you. There lies the heart of Stoicism, not asking for fewer obstacles, but for greater awareness, not demanding more gifts, but more capacity to see them. Not seeking perfection, but appreciating the imperfection that is already enough. When you practice gratitude, anxiety loses its grip, desire quiets, and the soul settles. Because you finally understand that life owes you nothing. You owe it attention, and in that attentive gratitude, at last, the mind finds its peace. 10th Stoic habit: speaking ill of the absent. Speaking ill of someone who isn't present is one of the subtlest forms of weakness. It looks like power, but it's emptiness. It looks like control, but it's fear. Fear of being small, fear of silence, fear of facing yourself without an enemy to blame. Criticizing others behind their backs is the refuge of the insecure, a fleeting illusion of superiority that soon turns into shame. Seneca warned precisely, when we speak ill of someone, we reveal our own character. And he was right. The words you choose when the other is not present speak more about you than about them. Defamation doesn't describe the absent person, it exposes you. The tongue that wounds in secret is a mirror showing your lack of inner mastery. In Seneca's Rome, rumors were political weapons. In ours, they are a daily sport. You don't need a senate to slander, just a group, a chat, or a social network. It's so easy to stain a reputation that we've forgotten the weight of doing so. But the wise know that every wrongly used word leaves a mark on the soul, not on the others, on your own. Speaking ill of the absent weakens you because it robs you of moral authority. You cannot preach virtue while practicing poison. Gossip disguises cowardice as cleverness. It's easier to talk about someone else's flaws than to correct your own. It's more comfortable to point than to transform. And so, little by little, the habit of judging becomes moral anesthesia. You feel good comparing instead of improving. Epictetus put it bluntly, "He who speaks ill of another does not harm their reputation, but his own." The Stoic understands that the tongue is a weapon to be wielded with temperance, not out of fear of others, but out of respect for oneself. Silence, on the other hand, is his shield. He doesn't need to have an opinion on everything, nor take part in conversations where nobility is absent. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best defense against slander is to live in such a way that no one will believe it. But that defense begins within, not without. The wise waste no time on rumors because they know attention is their most valuable possession." Every minute spent speaking ill of someone is a minute stolen from virtue, from action, from inner peace. When you speak ill of someone absent, you feed resentment. And resentment is a fire that never burns out. You think you're releasing tension, but in reality, you're poisoning yourself. Every venomous word you release into the air leaves residue within you. Your mind gets used to judging, comparing, suspecting. Over time, you no longer see people as they are, but as you fear they might be. The Stoics understood that criticism is useful only when born from love of truth. Most of ours, however, comes from wounded ego. You criticize what reflects you, what you envy, what you fear. The tongue becomes a mirror of your shadows. Seneca warned, "He who delights in fault-finding rarely improves, for one who focuses on others' flaws has no time to refine his own." Gossip is a modern form of idolatry. It worships another's mistake, magnifies it, spreads it, dissects it. But in doing so, you lose sight of your purpose. A mind that constantly watches other lives empties itself of its own. That's why the wise avoid circles where the absent are discussed. Not out of arrogance, but out of soul hygiene. Because the environment you inhabit shapes your character. Imagine a room filled with smoke. Even if you don't smoke, you'll leave smelling of tobacco. The same happens with toxic talk. Even if you don't speak, if you listen without discernment, you absorb the poison. That's why Epictetus advised, when someone speaks ill of another in your presence, stay silent or leave. Not to seem virtuous, but to stay clean. The habit of speaking ill also destroys trust. He who criticizes the absent will eventually criticize the present, and everyone knows it. The wise protect their reputation not with masks, but with consistency. Let your tongue be as just in the dark as in the light. Let your words about someone be the same ones you'd say if they were in front of you. That is the standard of a noble soul. Seneca taught that the wise measure their words as an architect measures his stone. Nothing is placed by chance. Every word should serve to build, not to destroy. If what you're about to say doesn't improve the silence, it's better to remain quiet. And if speaking means dishonoring someone who cannot defend themselves, your silence becomes an act of justice. Speaking ill of others also distorts your view of the world. The more you judge, the less you understand, because judgment interrupts observation. The critical mind stops learning, and whoever stops learning stagnates. The wise, in contrast, observe without condemning, not because they approve of everything, but because they understand that everyone acts according to their level of understanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When another harms you, do not think of the offense, think of their error. They deserve your teaching, not your hatred." That perspective transforms criticism into compassion. It doesn't justify, it comprehends, and comprehension doesn't weaken, it strengthens. For he who understands stops reacting, and he who stops reacting begins to rule himself. Speaking ill of the absent is also speaking ill of fate. It's complaining about how things are, instead of acting on what depends on you. The idle tongue reveals the idle mind, and the idle mind is fertile ground for resentment. The wise don't dwell on others' faults. They focus on their own virtue. Try this Stoic exercise. When you feel the urge to criticize, stop, breathe. Ask yourself, does what I'm about to say add anything? If not, stay silent. And if what you're about to say is true, ask, is it necessary? If not, stay silent again. Seneca said that prudent silence is the language of the strong. Don't confuse honesty with cruelty. Saying what you think isn't always virtue, sometimes it's vanity. The wise speak with purpose, not impulse. Their words seek clarity, not superiority. The controlled tongue is a peaceful mind. Speaking ill of the absent destroys more than you imagine: relationships, trust, self-respect, peace. But above all, it destroys your center. Every time you defame, you drift away from your logos. And the soul that drifts from its logos loses direction. Remember this: words are actions. Every time you speak about someone, you define who you are. You cannot build a serene life on a foundation of poison. Silence, on the other hand, is invisible strength. It leaves no mark outside, but it transforms within. Seneca wrote that no word once spoken can ever be recalled. That's why the wise guard their tongue as a warrior guards his sword. He unsheathes it only when necessary, and always with purpose. For he knows that a single careless word can wound more deeply than a blade, but a just word can heal what seemed broken. Speaking ill of the absent is forgetting the virtue of respect, the oldest of all human virtues. Respect is not admiration, it is awareness of boundaries. It's knowing that what you say about others also shapes your own soul, and he who guards his soul guards his words. So next time you feel tempted to criticize, remember, silence also communicates. It communicates mastery, temperance, and wisdom. And when you manage to stay silent where once you would have spoken, you'll have won one of the hardest battles of the soul, the battle to govern your tongue without losing your voice. The wise have no need to speak of the absent. Their attention is too busy building presence. And in that state, where the soul aligns with its virtue, the need to judge dissolves. Because you no longer need to feel better than others, you only need to remain faithful to yourself. The invisible weight of what you allow. Maybe you never realized how many times you've weakened without anyone striking you. It wasn't the shouting that broke you, but the silences. It wasn't defeat that destroyed you, but distraction. It wasn't pain that sank you, but that invisible surrender disguised as habit. Because weakness doesn't arrive like an earthquake. It arrives as routine. And routine, when left unexamined, becomes a prison. Every habit you tolerate without questioning becomes another rope around your soul. You don't notice it at first. You tell yourself, it's fine, just this once. I'll change it soon. But the things you repeat in silence eventually shape who you are. And one day you wake up unable to recognize the strength you've lost, not because someone took it, but because you slowly gave it away. Seneca said it mercilessly. The most unfortunate man is he who cannot rule himself. And that is exactly what happens when you stop guarding your habits. You lose command over yourself. You start reacting without thinking, pleasing without limits, postponing without reason. Every small decision you make out of fear or comfort takes you one step further from inner freedom. And the tragedy is that almost no one notices until it's too late. We are willing prisoners of noise, of comparison, of other people's approval. We surround ourselves with screens, voices, opinions, as if fearing silence were a survival reflex. But silence doesn't kill, silence reveals. And when you can't stand being alone with yourself, it isn't silence that hurts, it's you. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Strength is not measured by how much you can endure, but by how much you can govern yourself. Not by the number of battles you fight outside, but by the ones you win within. And those battles have no audience. No one celebrates them. No one applauds them. It's the invisible struggles that build you, resisting the urge to react, keeping quiet when you could scream, saying no when everyone expects yes, remaining honest when no one is watching. Modern life glorifies exposure, but the soul strengthens in the hidden places. There, where only you know if you are consistent. There, where your thoughts are the only witnesses of your virtue. There, where no one can pretend. Every weak habit is born from a weak thought, and every weak thought is born from a mind that has forgotten to stop. That's why the Stoics meditated on death, not out of obsession, but out of perspective. Memento mori, remember that you will die, is not a morbid phrase. It's a compass. It reminds you that you have no time to waste on what doesn't make you stronger. That every day you surrender to complaint, judgment, distraction, or dependency is a day that won't return. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what is weakening you today without you noticing? Don't think of great tragedies. Think of the small things. That comparison you replay, that conversation that only drains you, that excuse you repeat to avoid acting, that applause you crave, that fear you disguise as prudence. All of it seems harmless, but every particle of inertia weighs something, and when the soul accumulates too much inertia, it sinks. True Stoic training isn't in reading quotes, it's in looking at your life with brutal honesty. Ask yourself, how much of what I do comes from virtue and how much from habit? Whom do I serve daily, my reason or my fear? Am I the master of my time or the employee of my impulses? Answering that truthfully is the bravest act you can perform. Stoic strength isn't rigidity, it's awareness. It isn't coldness, it's depth. The wise don't erase emotion, they organize it. They don't extinguish the fire, they direct it. They don't flee from pain, they transform it. And that transformation happens only when you take responsibility for your mind. Your mind is your battlefield, your thoughts, your weapons, your attention, your victory. Seneca said, "No one complains about losing time, yet everyone complains of having too little." And that's the paradox that kills slowly. You ask for more hours, but waste the ones you have on the trivial. You seek serenity, yet feed what disturbs you. You beg for clarity, yet never stop the noise. The wise have no more time than you. They simply know theirs is running out. Perhaps today you need to understand that it isn't the world that weakens you. It's you when you abandon your inner discipline. No one can steal your calm without your permission. No one can make you react without your consent. No one can divert you from your purpose unless you hand them the wheel. True power is not in controlling what's outside, but in ruling yourself with serenity while the outside changes. So when anxiety comes, when comparison appears, when anger tempts you, when fear paralyzes you, remember this: everything passes, but what doesn't pass is what you build within while everything passes. That is your treasure, your stoic capital, your silent strength. Maybe today you can't change the world, but you can change your mind. Maybe you can't remove obstacles, but you can use them. Maybe you can't avoid pain, but you can decide not to suffer twice, once from what happens and once from what you think about it. So listen carefully to this final truth. Your strength lies not in what you endure, but in what you choose. Your peace lies not in what you control, but in what you accept. Your freedom lies not in noise, but in the silence you dare to hold. And when you begin to do this, something deep will shift. Not suddenly, not loudly, but you'll feel it. You'll sleep better, think less, judge with more compassion, not because the world has become easier, but because you've stopped making it harder. True transformation doesn't sound, it's felt. And when it begins to be felt, you'll know you're no longer the same, that where there was once anxiety, there is now calm. Where there was once reaction, there is now reflection. Where there was once weakness, there is mastery. The habits that once made you weaker no longer rule, not because you eliminated them, but because you understood them. And what is understood no longer controls you. So before you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself one simple question. Am I living as someone strong or merely surviving as someone distracted? The answer will be your mirror. And if you don't like what you see, don't run. Look at it calmly. Because right there, in that moment when you stop lying to yourself, begins the journey back to you. You don't need the world to change. You just need to wake up. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds. A community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.